ತೇಜಸ್ವಿಗೆ ಅಡ್ಮಿಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ರೆಡಿ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ ಲೈವ್ ಯೂಟ್ಯೂಬ್ ಲೈವ್ಗೆ?
ಓಕೆ ಓಕೆ ಮಾಡೋಣ.
ಓಕೆ
ಯೂಟ್ಯೂಬ್ಗೆ
ಓಕೆ.
गणानां त्वा गणपतिगुं हवामहे कविं कवीनामुपमश्रवस्तमम् ज्येष्ठराजं ब्रह्मणां ब्रह्मणस्पत आरः शृण्वन्नोतिभिः सीदसादनम् महागणपतये नमः। ॐ नमो व्रातपतये नमो गणपतये नमः प्रमथपतये नमस्तेऽस्तु लम्बोदरायैकदन्ताय विघ्ननाशिने शिवसुताय श्रीवरदमूर्तये नमः। प्रणो देवी सरस्वती वाजेभिर्वाजिनीवती धीनामवित्र्यवतु चोदयित्री सुनृतानां चेतन्ती सुमतीनां यज्ञं दधे सरस्वती वाग्देव्यै नमः। शम्भवे नमः। नमस्ते अस्तु भगवन् विश्वेश्वराय महादेवाय त्र्यम्बकाय त्रिपुरान्तकाय त्रिकाग्निकालाय कालाग्निरुद्राय नीलकण्ठाय मृत्युञ्जयाय सर्वेश्वराय सदाशिवाय श्रीमन्महादेवाय नमः। ये अर्वामुतवा पुराणे वेदं विद्वागुं समभितो वदन्त्यादित्यमेव ते परिवदन्ति सर्वे अग्निं द्वितीयं तृतीयं च हगुंसमिति यावतीर्वै देवतास्ताः सर्वा वेदविधिब्राह्मणे वसन्ति तस्मात् ब्राह्मणेभ्यो वेदविद्भ्यो दिवे दिवे नमस्कुर्यान्नाश्लीलं कीर्तयेदेता एव देवताः प्रीणाति।
सर्वेभ्यः नमस्काराः। ॐ पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रन्थकृतिथां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्धधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणीम् भगवद्गीता जयन्ती उत्सवनिमित्ततया आचर्यमाणसभा कृष्णार्पिता भवतु तेन च श्रीकृष्णप्रसादप्राप्तिरस्तु. Today we have Shri Shivakumar GV as the speaker, who is an IT professional with deep interest in Bharatiya Samskriti. He has a BTech in Computer Science from NIT Surat and MTech in Computer Science from IIT Bombay. His areas of interest are Mahabharata, Rig Veda, civilizational studies, computer science, and programming. He has over 20 plus years of experience in the IT industry, especially in the domain of learning and development, and he is passionate about technology, technical learning, and algorithms. Shri Shivakumar Ji is deeply interested in conflicts between the traditional Bharatiya civilization and modernity, Bharatiya Itihasa, Purana, and Tattva Shastra. With continued Swadhyaya, he has developed an insight into various aspects of our tradition. Mahabharata has been his go-to book for Bharatiya civilizational thought. He firmly believes that Bharatiya Parampara has its own theory of change and perspective of problem firmly rooted in a larger philosophy that is characterized by Shristi Sthiti Laya perspective and the Purushartha framework. From this frame of reference, it is possible to explain the West differently. He firmly believes the Purushartha framework shapes every aspect of human life very different from the way of modernity has been shaped. He is also one of the authors of Unsung Valor, Forgotten Wars of Kurukshetra, curated by Srimati Sai Swarupa Iyer for Indic Academy. He has published a paper on Vedic origins of sustainability and environmentalism in the International Online Conference on Indigenous Environmentalism, which was organized by Indic Academy in May 2020. Shivakumar Ji sir is also a consulting editor at Indic Today, anchoring publications in Kannada. He is currently curating an anthology on Indic Women of Substance for Indic Academy. And also, he is working on a book titled Creative Liberty in Bharatiya Parampara. Shivakumar Ji sir lives in Bangalore with his parents, wife, and daughter. He is greatly inspired by the rivers of India, for which they represent the unstopping flow of Sanatana Dharma. He considers River Saraswati as the representative of the essence of Bharatiya Parampara. Over to you, sir, as we wait for your enthralling talk. Sir, you're on mute.
Am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Namaste, one and all. Can you put the presentation?
Sure, sir.
Namaste. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naranchaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tado Jayamudirayet Vasudev Vasutam Devam Kamsacharnu Ramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. So, bowing to Vyasa, Saraswati, Ganapati, and to the Gitacharya, Shri Krishna, let me begin my talk today. As all of you can see, the topic for the day is Bhagavad-Gita Adhyayas and the Mahabharata stories, a correlation. So, what is important here is that I'm not going to go very deep into the philosophical aspects of Bhagavad-Gita, which I think, there are great many commentaries that are available, and there are many people who have been talking about that. Instead, I will share my perspective on stories from the Mahabharata and how they correlate with various concepts of Bhagavad Gita. And what is it that we can achieve through this? That is the purpose of today's presentation. Next slide, please. So before I go into the presentation, there are certain acknowledgements and pranams that I need to make. Firstly, obviously, to the entire Guru Parampara of Bharatavarsha. Like the great rivers of India, the Parampara has let us receive and pass this wonderful knowledge from generation to generation. Secondly, I thank Indic Academy for letting me think and go very deep into Mahabharata, due to which this presentation has been possible. Thirdly, my early spiritual and traditional education started with Chinmaya Mission. I learned many shlokas and Veda chanting. And more importantly, it is in Chinmaya Mission that an excitement for chanting Bhagavad Gita I developed. In particular, pranams to Swami Chinmayananda, because it is because of his organization and his writings that a deep interest in Bhagavad Gita and Upanishads developed in me. Next slide, please. Before I begin the actual presentation, let me give a small framework of thought using which I'm building this presentation. The strength of the Bharatiya Parampara. So what is the strength of the Bharatiya Parampara? It is one of the few, or rather the only one organization of life where there is a beautiful integrity between the tattvas and the tattva shastras and the daily life. And this is not a chance. At the highest level are the tattvas perceived and presented to us by the Vedic seers, which have then transformed themselves into darshanas, as we know. But from there till daily life, there is a stepped organization of life through dharma shastras, subsequently through Itihasa Purana, and then the social organizations, and then complex traditions built within the social organization that leverage the Tattva Shastras and the Dharma Shastras, but they build their own practices and customs and, way of leading daily life. Now, this complexity is not easy to achieve. You always have any number of scholars. As you can see, the mathematical scholarship of the world is far, far more complex than what a common man can perceive. But that is not so with Indian philosophy. The common man perceives the philosophy in one's own way. And the reason being, the complex philosophy is transferred through Itihasa Puranas in the form of stories. And that is the success of our tradition. Stories distill philosophy and present the essence to the larger society, especially children and especially in the early formative years of our life. Many things we learn about philosophy without actually studying philosophy because the stories have been in the air and we receive it. This is the fundamental principle of this presentation, and rest of it is because I believe in this. And it is an introduction to Bhagavad-Gita through stories that I want to present in this presentation, that we can operate ourselves in today's life. Let's move to the next slide. The structure of this presentation, I will give a small brief. We will briefly discuss the essence of Bhagavad-Gita. The purpose of this presentation is not to go into a discussion on that, because as I've said earlier, there are any number of masters who have already done this. But we will go into Bhagavad-Gita chapters and just make a note of what are the specific focuses of each of the chapters, and then do a slightly deep dive into what are the relevant stories from Mahabharata that also have the same concern as the emphasis of Bhagavad Gita and the coverage of each of the chapters. And who are those important characters in Mahabharata that we have to keep in mind. Then we will talk a little about how do we build a stepping stone into Bhagavad Gita through Mahabharata, which is the fundamental concern of this presentation. The objective of this presentation is that if we can leverage the stories of Mahabharata and make our children appreciate it way ahead of time, even before their age 16, then their journey into the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita will be that much more effective and that much more possible. Then if time permits, we will do a little bit of question answers and discussions. Let's go to the next slide. So let me give an essence of what the Bhagavad Gita presents to us. The Bhagavad Gita seems to be presenting to us a body of knowledge in three different sections: the karma, the bhakti, and the jnana. So in the karma, we see an elaborate discussion on what is karma, what is akarma, what is the nature of karma, what are the fundamental principles around the concept of karma from the standpoint of Bharatiya philosophy, and what is the usual practice of karma, and what are the fruits one expects at the lowest level. But at a higher level, what is the anasakta practice of karma? That is, I am performing karma, but I am not attached to it. Then a deep coverage of what is the relationship of karma with jnana. A fundamental emphasis of Bhagavad Gita is that karma, jnana, and bhakti are all together presented. There is a strong interrelationship, and the journey from one to the other is well elaborated. The relationship of karma to dharma, lokasangraha, and moksha. This is very, very beautiful shlokas are there in this, and this is a fundamental concern of Bhagavad Gita, because Arjuna is on the battlefield, and what is the right karma to achieve dharma? The concept of lokasangraha, which is not there in any other philosophical system or a way of life. Lokasangraha is about keeping the universe together. It is closely associated with dharma, and how it is only through this that you can achieve moksha. Sri Krishna Paramatma does not stop at this. Then he speaks about the nature of mind and how it is so difficult to achieve that. So in the end, he says, Abhyasena tu kaunteya, vairagyena cha grahyate. So it is only through abhyasa. I know the mind is fickle, it's very complex, it's very difficult, but abhyasa is the only way, the practice is the only way, and one can achieve vairagya to the extent that it is possible for one. That's a beautiful section. And Shri Krishna proceeds on the nature of nishkama karma and achieving absolute vairagya. So this is one set of concepts particularly elaborated in the initial chapters. It's very difficult to say the first 6 chapters only cover this and the next six chapters only cover this, because everything is covered everywhere. But this is the general emphasis of the initial chapters. Let's move to the next slide. Can we move to the next slide, please? Yeah. So then once the karma is elaborated, then the different aspects of bhakti, especially the Swarupa Dhyana. Swarupa Dhyana is, how do you immerse yourselves in the Swarupa of Bhagavanta? What is the Daivi and Asuri nature that exists, and how do we, be with the Daivi nature? What is the Saguna and the Nirguna aspect of nature? What is the form of the Supreme and the manifest of the Supreme as the excellent, that is in the Vibhuti Yoga, where Sri Krishna says that among the rishis I am this, among the Adhyayas I am this, so and so. Finally, the vision of the Supreme in entirety, which is the Vishwarupa Darshana. So this is the, and Bhakti and Swarupa Dhyana come after that, but I put it in the first because of the fundamental concern of that. Through the Swarupa Dhyana, how the devotion grows in us. So this is another set of concept. It comes everywhere, comes in the middle chapters a lot more. Next slide, please. Finally, the jnana. The jnana is about the Atma Jnana and how to achieve moksha, nature of moksha. What is the Daivi Sampat that we should possess and the Asuri Sampat that we should not possess. Visualizing the entire universe as the Ashwatha Vriksha. The 3 gunas and how the 3 gunas result in various aspects of life, and how always to be in the sattva. And what is the nature of karma that we must perform to be in the sattva? How does the Supreme reside in the body? What is the right kind of dana, tapas, and yajna? All of this leading to the good karma, finally the karma tyaga to achieve moksha. The nature of all of this and the knowledge of all of this, and how the knowledge of all of this helps us perform the right karma to achieve moksha. All of this is the coverage. And if I have left anything, I am really sorry about that. But this is the general essence. Hundreds of concepts are very beautifully interwoven in the Bhagavad-Gita. This is largely the summary of Bhagavad-Gita. Now we will see how different stories of Mahabharata cover these concepts. Initially, we will just do a browsing of those stories. Then we will go into each of those stories I've picked 4 important stories that really cover the essence of all of this. And each of those stories I will narrate in a few minutes, 5-6 minutes. I encourage everybody to go through all of those stories. They're all very fascinating stories. You begin those stories, you cannot stop reading those stories until you complete it. So beautiful they are. And how they build an introduction to these concepts and concerns of Bhagavad-Gita, not just concepts. The very concern of Bhagavad-Gita is well covered in those chapters. So, the Arjuna Vishada Yoga, we can move to the next slide, please. Okay, so then in these 2 chapters, we will see the 18 chapters in these 2 slides, and which are the stories that covered. The third column, that is the focus, we've already discussed. We don't need to elaborate it further, but we'll talk about this story, Mahabharata story, that is there, the last column. As you can see, the Arjuna Vishada, it's very similar to the kind of conflict that Dharmaraja goes through at various points in time in Mahabharata, and in particular after the Mahabharata war in Shanti Parva. It is quite unfortunate that of late, we do not read Shanti Parva. We stop at the Mahabharata war, then we jump to Ashwamedha Parva, and then finally go through the destruction of the Adhyayas and then the Swargarohana Parva. We do not read Shanti Parva, which is very, very unfortunate. In many ways, just to put it in a lighter way, it is my hidden agenda to make people read Shanti Parva. On a serious note, it is extremely important because the concerns of all initial chapters of Mahabharata and including Bhagavad-Gita are presented through fascinating stories in Shanti Parva and the Anushasana Parva. So one must read them. So read the sections where Dharmaraja goes through elaborate, immense conflict, and the number of sages who come and including the brothers, everybody come and speak to him in different ways and then help Dharmaraja come out of it. So that is the first chapter. The karma part of Bhagavad Gita is beautifully elaborated in the story of Dharma Vyadha. This is quite a well-known story. But it's the dimension of Dharma Vyadha's story that gets elaborated is 1 or 2 dimensions of those stories. But this story really holds the entire karma principles of Bhagavad Gita in a beautiful manner. For that, you have to read the full story. There are 3 parts to that story, and we will talk about that. The character of Sahadeva is to be very, very seriously focused. He's a quiet character throughout Mahabharata, but there is no insignificant character in Mahabharata. Even if a character comes just for one moment, one event, one scene, and one page, there is something significant that a character does. And the Atma Samyama that Sahadeva shows throughout, the equanimity that he shows, is of exemplary nature. Then the entire middle chapters are beautifully covered by just one story of Markandeya in Vanaparva. All these stories are in Vanaparva, in fact. The Dharmavyada story is also in Vanaparva. Markandeya's story is also in Vanaparva. So Markandeya comes and tells a lot of stories to the Pandavas. In particular, he answers a lot of questions that Yudhishthira raises. And Yudhishthira seeks to learn from him about, he is the only sage who has lived through the great deluge, the Pralaya. He has seen the Pralaya, and in that Pralaya, he has seen Sriman Narayana. entire essence of Vishwarupa Darshana is there in this one story. Not just that, a lot of bhakti and the Swarupa Dhyana is there in that story. There are a few other stories. Yayati's story, we kind of only read the Yayati story until Devayani, Sharmishtha, and Puru, youth taking youth away from him and giving it back. But what happens subsequently is not read at all. A beautiful treatise of what is yajna and so on and so forth, and various lokas come over there. So that is a must and should, and especially it correlates with chapter 8. In the Saraswati Tirthayatra Parva, where Balarama goes on the Saraswati river banks, there is a story of Asita Devala and Jaigi Shavya. Once again, an extremely important story from the standpoint of chapter 8. So these are some of the stories that we will go through them later. Next slide, please. So the initial middle stories are the Markandeya sage seeing the deluge, and the final stories, the final chapters are beautifully covered by various things, and one among them is Shukadeva attaining moksha in Shanti Parva, not to be missed at all. So Shuka's story and the Markandeya story together, and Dharmavyada's story, elaborate all of this in a great detail. At the same time, it is important in Mahabharata to keep track of what Vidura does all the time. It is important to note that Sri Krishna, when he goes to Hastinapura, when Pandavas are not there, he stays with Vidura. That is the amount of devotion that Vidura and Bhishma show to Sri Krishna, and the difference between Vidura and Bhishma throw light on certain aspects of Bhagavad-Gita. Even in devotion, there was a difference between the two, and we'll see that. So, thus, we have seen, in summary, 4-5 stories give a very good introduction or prepare people to appreciate the Bhagavad Gita better. This is not to say that the stories are a substitute for Bhagavad Gita. Otherwise, Bhagavad Gita would not have been present, and so many Paramacharyas would not have written commentaries on Bhagavad Gita. It's a system, it's a philosophy, it's complete, it's beautiful, it's poetry, it's so many things. But the stories of Mahabharata give a beautiful introduction to the Bhagavad Gita and operate at a subconscious level and build that appreciation in us without we coming to know that we are taking some steps towards the Bhagavad Gita. So it is with this purpose that this organization has been presented. Next slide, please. So let me go into one of the important stories. This is the story of Yavakrita. This is in Manaparva. All of us know the Sutta Puranika, who actually narrates the entire Mahabharata to Naimisharanya sages. Lomasha is the father of Sutta Puranika, or the Ugrashrava Sauti. He narrates the story of Yavakrita. Yavakrita is the son of Bharadvaja. Raibhya and Bharadvaja are two sages. So I'll give, it's a very complex story, but I'll try to put it in a few sentences. People should go back and read those stories. Raibhya has two children, Paravasu and Aravasu. Bharadwaja has one son, Yavakrita. The difference between Raibhya and Bharadwaja is that Raibhya is a master of the Vedas and performing of the yajnas, whereas Bharadwaja has renounced everything and is, more in the path of salvation, in the path of achieving moksha. As a result, there is far greater respect for Raibhya and lesser respect for Bharadwaja in the society, which Yavakrita hates. And Raibhya's children, Paravasu and Aravasu, also become as experts as Raibhya. The difference is that Raibhya has a lot more material yajna oriented and material aspiration, which flows to Paravasu. But Aravasu, the second son, has a very good balance of dharmartha, kama moksha. So in this story, what happens is that Yavakrita becomes angry. Yavakrita wants to learn all of Vedas through only tapas. Indra comes and tells him, you cannot do that. You have to work hard. The karma is important. The method is important. Bharadwaja has renounced karma early. Yavakrita wants to jump karma and acquire whatever he wants. Raibhya is in karma only and has not taken steps towards moksha. So on and so forth, and it goes. Yavakrita, Indra warns Yavakrita that you cannot achieve Vedic knowledge without Swadhyaya of many years. Finally, he wants it through tapas only, and Indra grants him some knowledge. Yavakrita becomes extremely arrogant. Yavakrita, in that arrogance, he assumes so much power that he goes and violates Paravasu's wife, Raibhya's daughter-in-law. Raibhya curses. Finally, Yavakrita dies. And finally, even Raibhya gets into trouble because of his lack of excessive materialism. Paravasu kills him unknowingly. Paravasu tells a lie, so on and so forth. The story goes on. Finally, who brings the balance in this entire story is Aravasu, because Aravasu has the perfect balance of tapas, karma, dharma, and renunciation. That balance is missing in everybody else in this story. So finally, because of Aravasu's tapas, in spite of the fact that Paravasu traps Aravasu, and all blame of killing Raibhya goes to Aravasu. But finally, because of Aravasu's tapas and devotion, the balance is restored and everybody else comes back alive. This is a beautiful story where the balance of Purushartha as well as how the pursuit of karma, jnana, bhakti together is very essential, is narrated. Any one thing missing leads to one kind of imbalance. This emphasis is beautifully brought in by this story. And the story is so fascinating and the story is so engaging that anybody who reads it for once will keep on going back. I've read this story 25 years back. Even today, I go back and read this story. So beautiful. Let's move to the next story. So the story of Dharmavyadha, this is very famous. So I will not, elaborate too much. Whereas Yavakrita's story is not very famous. So it is necessary to emphasize this more. But this has 2-3 phases. A Brahmin, Kaushika, of Kaushika Gotra, has left his home and is doing tapas and Vedadhyayana at a distance. One day he becomes, he's sitting and a crow, puts its waist on his head. And in anger, he looks at the crow burns to death. Only then Kaushika realizes his tapas. the power of his tapas. Then he goes for his daily bhiksha to to various houses in the village, and at one house, a grihini, she delays coming. So Kaushika becomes very angry that he was made to wait, and he looks at her with great anger. And the grihini smiles and says that, "Oh, Brahmana, don't think that the effect your anger had on the crow will also have on me." And the Brahmana is stunned. Firstly, how did she know that? Secondly, how did she withstand my anger? So then the Grihini says that, see, I am performing all my duties. I got delayed because I had to take care of my family. So a person who is performing the karma that is central to one's swadharma, nothing can happen to that person. Through performance of swadharma, through adherence to my karma, she's also acquired a lot of tapas, which is far bigger than that of Kaushika. And the Brahmana learns that, the way he has acquired tapas, the power of tapas is not the only way to acquire tapas, power. There is a significant strength in performing your own karma as part of your grihasthashrama, which is abandoned. So then Grihini advises him, go to Mithila. There is a person. Who is that person? Dharma Vyadha. Kaushika is stunned. Yes, go and learn from Dharma Vyadha, a butcher, and understand the subtle aspects of dharma. And then Kaushika goes. And he looks at, it's a long travel for him to Mithila. So he goes and he asks, and everybody guides him to, Dharmavyada is so well known. So everybody guides him. And then he observes for half a day, Dharmavyada is busy, cutting meat and serving all his people. Finally, he comes out and then he talks to him. Then Kaushika realizes how much Dharmavyada is deep into his profession. He's so full of devotion to the profession without being attached to the profession and the fruits of it. So the Nishkama Karma, entire Nishkama Karma, entire treatise of karma, he learns from Dharmavyada. The explanations that Dharmavyada gives, the questions that Kaushika asks, you can relate to the first 6 chapters of Bhagavad-Gita very, very, very well. It is so detailed. Some of the questions and answers are directly actually, correlating with certain specific shlokas themselves. So this story is about the centrality of karma. What is Nishkama Karma? How to perform karma without being attached to the fruits of karma. And it's very interesting, this story is chosen because it is not any other karma, it is actually cutting meat, and at one point in time, Kaushika asks, Dharmavyada, you know so much, why are you performing this? But he says, this is my swadharma, I am not to abandon my swadharma. So this appreciation of what is swadharma and acceptance of all karma that is associated with swadharma, whether it is the individuals or the ecosystems, without looking down upon anything, but not being attached to the fruits of it. Beautifully, this story brings about. And entire jnana of Dharmavyada is through karma only. So that is a shocker to Kaushika, who has abandoned karma and trying to seek jnana. So there is no moksha without, the route to moksha is through karma. This beautifully portrays that. Next, this is in the Markandeya Samasya Parva of Manapata. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Tejasji. Yeah. So this story is also there in the Bhagavata. This story is also there in the Bhagavata. So Yudhishthira asks Markandeya, Markandeya is well known as this great sage who has seen through the deluge. That is the pralaya. So Yudhishthira asks him to explain, his experience, and then Markandeya, explains. So he speaks about how the Kali Yuga was of the previous Manvantara. First of all, he explains Yuga, Manvantara, Kalpa, and the previous Kali Yuga, and how the whole thing degenerated, and how the deluge or the pralaya. There's a beautiful explanation of what is pralaya in that story. That's not important. But finally, Markandeya is sailing through that, and in that big pralaya, he sees a big banyan tree with a small cot and a small boy who is called as Balamukunda in that story. And Markandeya looks at him and is pulled into the mouth of the boy, and inside the stomach he sees the entire universe, and then he realizes that it is none other than the great Sriman Narayana. This explanation is very, 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 very similar to the Vishwarupa Darshana and the Vibhuti Yoga and that essence of that, and then subsequent chapters. And the devotion that one acquires by seeing the vision of the Supreme, the Swarupa Dhyana, that part is beautifully explained in this story. So finally, he lives inside the stomach for hundreds of years, and he fails to, he tries to measure the length and breadth of the entire stomach, and he cannot do it. The moment he recognizes, oh, this was not a small boy, it is nothing but Sriman Narayana, then he is thrown back. That's a beautiful metaphor. That is, the recognition of the Supreme is the moksha for him. He comes out, then Narayana reveals him his true self, the enormity of it, and he tells Markandeya that any pain that you suffered inside the stomach is for your good only. Everything is inside me, and I'm inside everything. That is the meaning of the word Narayana. So then Markandeya recovers from the shock of it. So his ego is forever completely dissolved by watching this supreme phenomenon. And the devotion that resides in him is forever. And then he declares to Yudhishthira that Sri Krishna, that boy was none other than Sri Krishna, and this Sri Krishna is Sriman Narayana. So it's a beautiful chapter where the essence of 12th chapter and certain other chapters are presented. Especially the jnana part of it that comes through this vision in the last 6 chapters, a lot of them have also been covered in this story. The next slide, please. This is another very, very beautiful story, but not well known because it is tucked inside the Tirthayatra Parva of Shalya Parva. That is when Balarama gets angry on Sri Krishna and goes off on the banks of river Saraswati, Tirthayatra. It's a long Tirthayatra. And this is on the river Saraswati. And this is my most favorite part of Mahabharata. And he visits from Tirtha to Tirtha on river Saraswati. So it's almost in a in a book it covers 250 pages. And one of those tirthas is Aditya Tirtha. And when he goes there, so then Vaishampayana narrates related stories, to Janamejaya. And one of those stories is the story of Asita Devala and Jaigishavya. This story corresponds to aspects that are there in Daivasura Sampat and Lokas, wealth, and leading to moksha. And what is the role of karma over there? That is important. So everything has a karma angle. So I'll briefly summarize the story. Asita is a grihastha, but a really performing grihastha. He performs all his karma according to the shastras and a lot of nishkama karma. And very austere life he is leading. Jaigishavya is a sannyasi. He comes and he stays with Asita Devala, and he every day he's on his own, doesn't speak much, but just comes to receive his bhiksha from Asita. Again, he's silent. Asita is also a great swadhyaya person and lot of samachittata, no chitta vikara. But he learns that one day he sees that Jaigishavya is most of the time not there. So he checks, where is he? Where is Jaigishavya? And then he realizes that Jaigishavya is going to all the 14 lokas. And Asita Devala follows him. He is impressed by the Jaigishavya's yoga and sannyasa adherence. But inside Asita Devala, there is a small ego that he is such a great performer. And he follows Jaigishavya. So he follows Jaigishavya from one loka to another loka. Everywhere Jaigishavya is ahead of him. Finally, Jaigishavya disappears. And Asita Devala realizes that from other sages that Jaigishavya has got to Brahmaloka and he cannot go to Brahmaloka. It's beyond Asita Devala. He tries, but he falls. So Asita Devala decides that he will seek sannyasa because that's the only way for him to reach Brahmaloka. Now comes the most interesting aspect. When he decides to, Jaigishavya gives him diksha. I'm okay, I'll give you diksha. But when he gives diksha, all the devatas come to Asita Devala and cry, if you go away, who will give us, who will do all the grihastha functions? Who will give us the harvest? We are going to lose out. So the devatas are dependent on the grihasthas. So then Asita Devala decides, okay, I'll not go. But then all the plants and other forms of life, they come and request him, you go away please, because you are going to cut us and offer to the devatas. That's a beautiful moment where Asita Devala realizes that there is this conflict. This is the conflict between the karma and the moksha paths. Finally, Asita Devala chooses sannyasa after weighing, the whole thing with a great deal of detail. So what this beautiful story is telling is that this is the other side of Yavakrita story. Even if you want to achieve moksha, there is a method to it. Asita Devala could not have found Jaigishavya without being that great grihastha performing all his karma. That is why Jaigishavya came to Asita Devala. Otherwise, Jaigishavya would not have come. Now, without Jaigishavya coming, Asita Devala's path to moksha would have never been revealed completely. So, in this small story, the contradiction and the result, not contradiction, but how one's completion alone can take you to the other is beautifully revealed. It's a parallel to what what happens to Arjuna and to Dharmaraja. So you have to perform that duty. See, cutting plants and offering, it is necessary. Similarly, Arjuna has to perform what he must perform. This is a beautiful complementary story to the entire narrative. Next slide, please. So I will not go too much. This is really I will summarize this story. This comes in Shanti Parva. It's a long story. It's a very, very long story. This is the story of Shuka, sage Shuka, son of Vyasa, achieving mukti. In this process, the nature of karma, the nature of jnana, nature of moksha, the knowledge which is there in the last 6 chapters are beautifully put. Firstly, he is born with a divine intervention through Apsara Ghritachi. He is born with divine consciousness. So his Siddha Moksha is already on the path. Yet he goes to sage Brahaspati and learns everything. He has to perform Swadhyaya. Remember what Krishna says. I also perform a lot of karma, but I'm not attached to it. So that is how Shuka lives his life. Finally, Vyasa sends him to King Janaka to learn about moksha. You see, the path is never to be forgotten. Even if you are a Siddha Purusha. Then he goes to Janaka by walking, not by using his divine powers, even though he has divine powers. And in Mithila, he is tested by Janaka significantly. But he does not fall into any of the traps. He learns about Purushartha, Ashrama, Karma, Jnana, Vijnana. He knows everything. Yet, he learns it from a practitioner, then to a king. Then he experiences Atman there, comes back, now returns by Akashamarga, continues his practice for many years. And after the 5 Shishyas of Vyasa, they all complete their learning. Then he performs all his duties towards his father. Then only attain moksha. Even while attaining moksha, Vyasa is coming running behind him. So then, Shuka says, take care of my father to a lot of Apsaras and Siddhas and everybody. And then he goes. Great example, great story for, the nature of the jnana of everything. Jnana of karma, jnana of the universe, of the supreme, everything. The knowledge is of the divine consciousness is beautifully summarized in this story, and it is yet again a fascinating story. So that is the reason why I am presenting this as a ways and means of training young children or anybody else, because this story works at a subconscious level and transfers those philosophical elements. So this is about anasakta karma and karma with complete jnana. This is in Shanti Parva. Next slide, please. At the same time, the main line of Mahabharata should not be forgotten. There is an integrity between all these Upakhyanas stories and the main stories. Sahadeva and Vidura, they perform karma without having this ego of I am the karta. So akarta sense is very, very high. That is why they are able to follow Shri Krishna all the time perfectly. Bhishma and Drona suffer from the karta problem. I am the karta, hence I am responsible for everything, traps them into what happens. Dharmaraja also suffers that, but because of his ecosystem, he constantly brings himself up because Shri Krishna is there. Whereas the Dushta Chatushtaya, they continuously collapse into the asuri dimension because they do not recognize divinity, and karta bhava is highest. So only artha kama is there and nothing else is there for them. So these concepts of the Bhagavad Gita are, well metaphorically represented by these characters of Mahabharata. So this is the short summary of how some Bhagavad Gita, some Mahabharata stories can be used to run as a parallel to the Bhagavad Gita. Once again, I would like to emphasize that it is not a complete substitute, but it is a stepping stone as a preparatory material to build that appreciation of the world of Bhagavad Gita, so that people can gain an entry into the philosophy more seamlessly rather than directly jumping into the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita, because it's like these stories are like creating a beautiful container in which the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita can be poured and held. Otherwise, if we do not build the containers within ourselves to hold the philosophical concept, how much ever we study, they're likely to overflow and they're not likely to give us the right benefit. Next slide, please. Finally, I would like to conclude by saying that age 4 to 8, we must build an appreciation into chanting of Bhagavad Gita by children. They will love it, I can guarantee you, because the Sanskrit shlokas, the sound and the rhythm, and there is a pada saukhya, there is a shabda saukhya, and there is a bhasha saukhya in Sanskrit, which is way beyond meaning. Meaning will come later, but there is a balance of sound, balance of syllable, balance of rhythm in Sanskrit language that every child will love, and to the extent that is possible, one will learn, which I have experimented. 8 to 12 is where you can introduce these stories, and they will appreciate these stories because of the sheer fascinating imagery that these stories contain without recourse to philosophy, and that's perfect. 12 to 16, you can build a little ability to analyze. You can ask a question. Oh, why did the Grihini get that power? Why did Kaushika get angry at the bird? So these questions will lead to very beautiful answers. In Mahabharata, nothing is told directly. It's because the stories have this power to raise these questions in the minds of people. Once this training is complete, age 16 onwards, one will be better ready to go deep into the commentaries and then not just understand, but to hold them within themselves. Finally, it is the practice that matters and nothing else. Whatever we can practice in our life is what, is the real impact of everything. So this is my short submission from the standpoint of Mahabharata, which continues to fascinate me. So every time I jump into the ocean of Mahabharata, there is some gem that Bhagavan Vyasa, gives to us by his grace. Thank you. And if there are any questions, any points of discussion, we can take that up.
I immensely thank you, Shri Shivakumar sir, for this wonderful session. We now move towards the last part of the session for the meaningful question and answers. And as it has been our custom in our previous webinars too, we have opened the chat box for everyone to post their questions. And I request all of you to provide the feedback for today's session, and the link of the feedback form has been posted in the chat box. Also, your magnanimous donations will come back to you in the form of thought-provoking webinars in the future, and we promise for that. We'll take up the question answers, sir, now.
Thank you. Any questions?
So yeah, we have the first question from Deepak.
Yeah.
He's asking, can you suggest easy
Easy.
books on Mahabharata, I guess. Is it so, Deepak?
Easy
Yes.
on Mahabharata.
So Shiva, I have very limited knowledge about it. So I think the way that you said was really nice. I was thinking if there's any easy books that we could sort of buy and then read through.
Yeah. I will tell you. Chakravarti Rajgopalachari's Mahabharata is simply wonderful for beginners. If one is a lot of upakhyanas are well covered. So if you take Amar Chitra Katha, the upakhyanas are not covered. So for very young kids, that's useful. But for an elder to begin with Chakravarti Rajgopalachari's Mahabharata, which is just a small book and you can finish it off in like a day, it's wonderful. Even today, very, very relevant.
Sure.
And if you want a very detailed study, then buy Dr. Bibek Debroy's Mahabharata, which is 10 volume, and you'll find literally everything unabridged. You will find. So between these are the two extremes that you can have.
Thank you, Shivu.
We have one more question from Amit. So he asks, Pitra Runa is clear, but what about Rishi Runa? Is it the brahmacharya or the self-study is what he's asking.
See, most of the Rishi Rina is through dissemination of knowledge. Now, every practitioner in the past always had a Shishya. Now that, has been lost and we'll have to recreate that in the modern world. And in the modern world, how we will recreate it, we don't know. But, maybe we write and put it on a blog, and that is also part of Rishi Runa. But dissemination of knowledge is the way. It is to ensure that there is continuity of life. And continuity of life means the physical life and the traditional knowledge continuity. Both are extremely valued in the tradition. And continuity of knowledge is the way you can serve the Rishi Runa.
Thank you, sir. There is one more question on any possibility of this presentation being available on YouTube. Yes, sir. Under the Niracula channel, this video will be available to you, sir. We have one more question from Shoma. What is your own favorite lesson from the Mahabharata that you use it in your life?
Thank you so much for this question. That a balanced pursuit of Purushartha is extremely important. For me, the Yavakrita story is a warning. Any one thing you reduce, you ignore karma, the tragedy of Bharadwaja will be there. You ignore moksha, the tragedy of Raibhya will be there. And you ignore Swadhyaya, the tragedy of Yavakrita will be there. So Aravasu is our ideal. So I'm just using that story because I chose this story. So that is the essence of it. But for me, from Mahabharata, the most important thing personally for me is the concept of river Saraswati. River Saraswati, and we don't read it much because it is there as part of Balarama Tirthayatra. Literally every philosophical concern of Bharatiya Parampara is there in that story. And it also links us to Rigveda, so which is separate. But, to really deepen the essence of our Parampara, that Tirtha Yatra that Balarama did, that is, everybody should go through that. I mean, reading that is actually performing the same Tirtha Yatra. And there is something significant that everybody will get through that.
Thank you, sir. We have one more question from Amit. How do we reconcile Sarva Karma Sannyasa at a very young age and the three runas? Is what he asks.
So that is really very complex, and that is, I don't know. I mean, I should not attempt an answer to that in in this session, which we will not get so much time. Neither do I think I'm having the adhikara to respond to that question. I may have some textual knowledge, but far more important people, who are practitioners should respond to that. So I would refrain myself from answering that question.
Thank you, sir. We have one more question from Jalaj. So he is thanking for your excellent presentation, and he asks, how do we engage our teenage children in the West to Bhagavad-Gita, as the surrounding parampara here does not enable the darshan that the Bhagavad-Gita conveys?
That's a very good question. Makes me think a lot. Finally, we should pass on the knowledge and let them figure it out by themselves. This is another aspect of our parampara, that we will have an akarta bhava, that beyond a point the sankalpa of the Supreme takes over everything, and we will do our best. So introducing stories are the best way to engage with them, and linking them with the ecosystem where the practice is good is another way. Beyond this, one has to let them find their own way. Not just about the West, even in India, even in Bangalore, even in Delhi. It is how it will be. So we will have to have a little bit of, I am not doing this, I am doing it to some extent, but through me the Supreme is performing. So a little bit of that distancing is very essential. I'm telling this to myself, not just to others. So we will do our best. And what we will do the best is, we will transfer the knowledge to the best extent that is possible, and we will show what we are practicing. I think beyond that, it's very difficult. And the strength of our parampara is that it will go and touch them at some point in time. And we will need to have that confidence and faith in that. I don't claim to, have an answer to this, but I'm just saying how I will approach this.
Thank you, Shivakumar, sir. Mukund asks to suggest a good book on Bhagavad-Gita.
There are very many. My favorite is still the Gita Press book. The Gita Press book is simple, easy to understand, available in multiple languages. But then there are many books, for me, as I put in the initial slide, the teachings of Swami Chinmayananda was a very important influence. In the end, I would say now for young kids, Dr. Vivek Devroy has come up with a new book, Bhagavad-Gita for millennials. And I'm sure, having read previous books of Dr. Devroy, I'm sure that will be fantastic, and it will serve the purpose of today. in the end, little bit of trial and error is required. People have to try a couple of books and then pick one. But I would say these three will be, fantastic. Well, even Amar Chitra Katha's single comic on Gita, I used to enjoy, and I still enjoy, because it's phenomenal that a philosophy is presented as a comic strip book. It's fantastic, actually. So there are multiple options. These are some things that I have tried out, and I'm eager to read Dr. Debraj's book. But Swami Chinmayananda's lectures and Swami Gambhirananda's books are very, very highly respected. In that, I would say try it out. It's very difficult. It's good to have a list of 10, read a couple of chapters, and then pick the one that that is to your liking in rhythm.
Thank you, sir. I think we have no more questions on the chat box. Dhanyavada Shivakumar ji, sir. We had a very lively evening today exploring different facets of Bhagavad-Gita. And knowing Dhanyavada is an understatement, I pray God and goddesses to bestow upon you for health and happiness. So we end this session with this stotra. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarvatra sanmangalani bhavantu. Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste. Nirakula is a yogashala which firmly believes in promoting the ancient yogic tradition in the strictest sense and in its entirety. All our courses, may it be short-termed or long-termed, have in them the essence of mantra, tantra and yantra, guided by the principles of Yoga Parampara put forth by the Maharishis like Patanjali, Swatmarama and others. Hence, at Nirakula, the courses have been formulated keeping in mind the vastness of yogic traditions. Our system is a rich blend of yoga, both as chikitsa and sadhana. We strive to use the principles of yoga to synchronize with nature as much to correct the imperfections of the body, breath, and mind. The following fundamental principles are firmly believed and practiced at Nirakula. Nurture excellent practitioners to carry forward the rich tradition of yoga into the future and to address the unending challenges facing humanity today. Create a strong urge amongst the practitioners to embrace the continuous cycle of physical, mental, and spiritual growth. A few uniqueness of our long-term programs like 200 hours and 300 hours teachers training programs are as follows. Our 200 hours teacher training course is integrated with 20 hours of spoken Sanskritam course. As part of the course, we provide participants an understanding of ancient Indian astronomy, history, and psychology. Our 300 hours teacher training course covers a plethora of subjects including Swara Yoga, Nada Yoga, Mantra Yoga, Yoga philosophy, and psychology, a teaching methodology based on ancient Indian scriptures. This program opens up the participants towards ideas least discussed in academics like marriage, parenting, nutritious food that strengthens spiritual journey. During this program, we take students out to different parts of India and help the participants to realize as to how yoga has been internalized in our culture for more than 5,000 documented years. We have teachers to teach pratyahara and dharana practically. Our graduation day is based purely on the principles of ancient Indian idea of convocation. Namaste.